All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Quasar QUA-NOLOGY number 18. This is the podcast that reviews every chronological appearance of your favorite superhero, Quasar. I'm your co-host, Mike L, and as always, I'm joined by
Joshua Mervell. Yeah, I'm pretty excited to chat about these kind of like strange, weird appearances of Quasar. We're kind of jumping out of the continuity of his own comic run, and we're going to be talking about some Avengers issues and some annuals and X-Men comics and things like that. So that's some weird, Marvel wild stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to talk about, now this is what's interesting about this to me as a Quasar fan, is these issues all came out, except for the annual, the two issues of Avengers and Marvel Comics Presents were published before Quasar number 1. So that's what makes it really fascinating to me, is that this Quasar story in Marvel Comics Presents that we're going to talk about at the end is actually drawn by Paul Ryan. And I didn't even know it existed until like a few weeks ago, which is crazy because it's like, you know, finding like a B-side from your favorite band that you didn't know existed, right? Or something. But this is just really cool. So first today, let's actually, we didn't talk about who's summarizing what. I can do the Paul Ryan story because I love Paul Ryan.
Sure, I can try and tackle these Avengers books if you want. Yeah.
Sure.
So we're going to be talking about both Avengers 302 and 303. It's part 2 and part 3 of the Supernova saga.
Right. We're not going to do part 1 because Quasar wasn't in it. Right.
Right. And it is featuring the East Coast Avengers, which is pretty cool. The East and West Coast Avengers, right? So it's both teams in this issue, which is pretty fun. Essentially, we kind of get a recap of what happened in issue 1 right at the start of 302, while we see this giant Nova Corps Xandarian man shooting towards Earth. And what we find out in the narration is that he just got into a battle with the East Coast Avengers, which is like Captain America, like the team that we kind of know as the Avengers. He was fighting them in space, and they got into some sort of confrontation because he was looking for the Avengers to try and find Nebula, who recently destroyed Xandar. So he wants revenge. The Avengers kind of defeated him and blew up his ship. So now he's come to Earth to take revenge. So he is heading there right now, and he's going to essentially destroy Earth until the Avengers give up Nebula, which he thinks that they have because she joined the team for a brief time. I guess 3 whole days she was on the Avengers team before getting lost into another dimension. And like a timeless dimension. So, she's like, she got pushed out of the time stream, I think they say. So he shows up on Earth, and of course, Quasar's band start notifying him of some sort of alien threat to Earth. So he flies over and starts blasting this gigantic man in the middle of Chicago. What?
Oh, no, I'm just counting something in my head. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I'm counting months. Go ahead.
Gotcha. He's battling this gigantic, 100-foot tall man. And he's like using his energy beams to put him in handcuffs. But this guy is able to kind of use the Nova Corps and solar energy, and they're doing some like battling. He destroys a helicopter, and Quasar's got to stop it. And then we cut over from that action to the West Coast Avengers, and they kind of hear about something going on in Chicago, and they're playing poker, and they're kind of like, I bet the East Coast Avengers are already on their way, right? Do we really need to do this? And then Peggy calls, and she's like, no, unfortunately, they're stuck in space, so you guys need to go do this. So the 4 of them, which is Hank Pym, Tigra, Wonder Man, and Hawkeye, who is the leader, fly over to to Chicago to help out. And we cut back to space where we left off from the first issue. And Sue Storm has put the Avengers in one of her force fields before the explosion. So they are all safe. We have this isn't super important to like the Quasar story, but I want to like stop for a second and describe this because I thought it was really goofy but fun at the same time. So they're all in this bubble together, and Thor's like, hey, I can actually just fly us all to space in this bubble, but I need to go into space. So you guys need oxygen to breathe, but I don't. So what they do is they make like a little part of the bubble that kind of like indents out, and Thor squeezes up really tightly into this small part of the bubble, and Sue Storm closes that part and separates it and then pops it. So Thor is on the outside without exposing the rest of the team to the vacuum of space. Right. I know it was just like something small, but it was like
very cool.
Yeah, like a little problem that they had to get through, and I thought that was really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, the West Coast Avengers show up. Wonder Man starts punching him, but he's easily thrown to the ground. The rest of the team's like, whoa, that's crazy, because that nobody's really been able to do that to him. Not even Hank, when he was Giant Man at that same size, he wouldn't be able to kind of like take on Wonder Man. The rest of the Avengers do end up getting back to Earth. They have some trouble on re-entry. The oxygen around the bubble is like catching on fire, and what's his dude's name again?
Firelord
shows up and has to help them out. They end up parachuting down and being fine. And they end up kind of like they end up going to the Fantastic Four headquarters, I believe. And we see Hawkeye has an idea. He's going to go up and actually just try and reason with him, because he figures out that what he's looking for is Nebula. So we are left on this cliffhanger of like, is Hawkeye going to be able to kind of reason with this giant angry Xandarian? Then
cliffhanger, as in not a very exciting one, but yeah, go
not
ahead.
A very exciting one, especially considering where this one starts off. Like, imagine if the other one ended where this one starts, because that would be a great cliffhanger. Because in 303, Hawkeye is talking to this guy, and he gets so angry. He's like, I don't believe you. You're lying to me. And he disintegrates Hawkeye.
Right.
Imagine if that was the final frame. Just poof.
And it was only two.
Hawkeye's dead.
It was only 2 pages they could have added, or 2 or 3 pages they could have just moved over to the previous issue. You're right.
Right. And then it's not. And then the next page, we realize, oh, he's fine. Actually, Hawkeye didn't die. It turns out that Quasar put an energy bubble around him right before he was about to get disintegrated, and like zoomed him off to safety. So Hawkeye and Quasar meet, and they're like, okay, we're gonna work together and try and stop this. So they meet up with the other Avengers, and they get a little moment to kind of reconnect after they think that their best friend or their leader died. The Fantasticar shows up, and Thing and what's the Thing's girlfriend's name right now? Tracy, right?
Sharon.
Sharon? Okay.
Sharon Ventura, yeah. And her name is Ms. Marvel.
Oh, okay. There you go. Ms. Marvel.
Yeah.
Who is a Thing, another Thing.
Yeah, the she thing, yeah. Technically, they're not dating, but yeah. They're just seeing each other. No, I'm kidding. No, but I actually don't think they're actually a couple, are they?
Really? Because he Thing says, hey, that's my main squeeze your squeezing buster. So I'm pretty sure they are dating, yeah.
Okay.
So anyways, this giant Xandarian is able to like squish the two things together and throw them to the ground. The Human Torch and Firelord start blasting fire at him. They're all kind of like teaming up to take this guy down. Captain America is like, you know, talking to the army, like evacuate the city. We kind of see all of these small moments of both of these teams teaming up and the Fantastic Four to kind of settle this situation. We, again, it's kind of just like more of a montage of a fight until we get to the moment where we see Reed Richards kind of thinking in the background while Captain America is talking to some of the military guys. And he's like, yeah, that's a good idea. Kind of like talking to himself. And he jumps into action. And Captain America's like, whoa, what are you doing, Reed? You're not supposed to be in on the action right now. And he interrupts Quasar, introduces himself, and is like, hey, do you think you can give me a lift back to the Baxter building? And he's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So he zooms him over there, and Reed is like going through all of his like technology and his devices, and he's looking for something specific. And then he's like, oh, I need an adapter to make this on a bigger scale. And yeah. We don't really know what's going on. He's kind of putting something together. We cut back. The Avengers are still fighting this guy. And then and Mr. Fantastic shows up with Quasar, and he's there with a time machine. And he explains that, that Nebula is stuck in a dimension, this like timeless dimension. Nebula is outside this time stream. She is not on Earth, but she can be sought with this time machine I have brought from New York. So he convinces this guy to go through to the time machine and kind of like get lost in the vastness of space, in between space, to try and look for Nebula. And then when everything kind of settles down, all of the Avengers are kind of like, whoa, is that really going to work? And Mr. Fantastic's like, what I said was true. It'd be a miracle if he ever finds her. So he kind of tricked her by telling the truth and omitting some of it. And then it really kind of just ends abruptly.
But which is okay, because
we do pick up kind of. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, but don't forget about the little character moment with Captain America being pissed off that Reed Richards initiated this whole plan without consulting him, because he's the leader of the Avengers, right?
Right, yeah, sure. He's like thinking this in his head. So, yeah, this was kind of a fun little story, like this little arc that has a bunch of characters in it. Surprisingly, it wasn't as messy as I thought it was going to be. A lot of times with these big, huge crossover events, it's in like an annual or like an event that spans over multiple books, and it's just kind of an event to put all the characters together. But this genuinely kind of felt like a threat that needed multiple teams to show up, and these teams made sense that they were all there together, right? With the East and West Coast Avengers, and then Quasar getting the notification on his bands. It all kind of like ties in nicely. Plus, while the story itself isn't very strong, I think that the character moments are really great. We actually see members from different teams teaming up and using their powers in unique ways to help each other out to defeat this guy. So it's not just like all of these action figures in one place and they're punching each other.
Right.
Like we actually see them like thinking and using their brains and like their powers together to like overcome a situation. So I thought it was pretty cool.
You know, well, we should point out as a little bit of a backstory. First of all, this was written by Ralph Macchio and edited by Mark Gruenwald, who also helped with the plot. Now, not only is Mark Gruenwald the writer of Quasar, the one we've been reviewing, he's also the co-writer with Ralph Macchio of the Project Pegasus story that we read.
Oh,
remember?
Interesting.
With Quasar and the thing. Yeah, so that's one reason the characterization is so dead on, right? Now, we should also explain this team, this weird lineup of Avengers. The lineup of the Avengers membership at this time was Captain America, Mr. Fantastic, Invisible Woman, Thor, and Gilgamesh. A very oddball lineup that only lasted like 3 or 4 issues. What happened was Roger Stern was doing Avengers. He got fired. Walt Simonson took over. He created this lineup. He got fired. Then they had a couple fill-ins. Then John Byrne took over with 304, and he kind of shook everything up and made every member of Avengers who had ever existed is now a current member of the Avengers, and then kind of just went from there, right? So anyway, as of 300 of Avengers, Captain America was wearing his black suit, the U.S. agent suit,
Right.
the black one, right? And he was called the Captain. But then in between issues, he went back to being Captain America, so now he's Captain America. But anyway, so it's just an interesting lineup. And the reason that you saw me counting earlier in the episode is that this came out 7 months before Quasar #1. And again, I started buying Quasar not because of his appearances in Avengers, but because of just like a promo for his monthly book. So it's just cool to finally go back and read these, like, what is that, almost 35 years later, 34 years later, just to see, what these stories were like. And we've got a great cover here, not a great cover, but a decent cover by John Buscema, inked by Tom Palmer. The interior art is by Rich Buckler, who's famous for in the 70s for kind of doing, I think he did Fantastic Four. He's got his fans, but I've kind of found him always to be like a generic Marvel artist. Like he's also famous for swiping. So like that opening page of Nova Prime is a swipe of, I think it's a Kirby or a Buscema page. And then throughout the book, the storytelling is pretty clear, but he's kind of notorious for, like, if you go through his pages, you can see like, oh, this is a Kirby, this is a Buscema, this is a Bill Kane, blah, blah, blah. And so, yeah, the art is decent, but it's helped by Tom Palmer Jr.'s inks. His inking is so distinctive. Interesting. He's probably, one of the 2 or 3 most distinctive inkers of this era. Another one being, I think it's Alfredo Alcala, but I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. But Tom Palmer can ink anyone, and it looks like Tom Palmer Jr. Or, sorry, Tom Palmer Sr. But anyway, the significant thing about this story is this is the first time we've seen Quasar since that Hulk parade that we reviewed 3.5 years ago, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So he had disappeared for like 6 years. He shows up here. But the cool thing about Marvel continuity with, Mark Gruenwald kept it so tight that they already had everything planned out for Quasar #1 and 2 and 3. So that's why he's already got his status quo. He's already in his office in the Four Freedoms Plaza, right?
Right.
In the second issue, Human Torch is like, oh, it's you again. So, and there's a little note that says that cryptic reference will be revealed soon, right? Because they've already, in #3, they've already fought each other, right?
Right. That's so
it's just
interesting.
Cool because, like publishing-wise, this comes before Quasar #1, but chronologically, it's after it. So it's just kind of interesting. And then Quasar doesn't do much. He's only in a few pages of 302, and he's only in a few pages of 303, but it is nice to see him, kind of being set up.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that we get, like, he's almost like the main character at the start. Like, we get like a reintroduction of him, which I guess would be pretty strange for somebody reading Avengers at the time, because this character hasn't been around for a few years now, and all of a sudden shows up in some random Avengers comic and gets like a new backstory about, like, I guess he wasn't even Quasar, or I guess he was Quasar, right?
Yeah, he was Quasar,
because the first few issues of Quasar is kind of going back and time and setting up his new story. So, but anyways, and he's really fun. I think he's kind of like a cool character to be fighting this giant Nova guy. And I really love this premise. I know I've talked about this before, that the bands kind of alert him to alien existence on the planet. So then we can have like different stories every time he goes out to do things. So like this is very different from the other appearances of the weird alien things that have showed up. And we're going to be talking about this later, but like it's not always just like battling some giant alien invasion. It could be helping somebody out. It could be,
good point.
It's really cool. So I really like him in both of these issues. Later on, him teaming up with Mr. Fantastic, who he is tied to through the Baxter building, or for the Four Freedom, or the Four Freedom building.
Plaza.
Right. Yeah. So, and I guess Reed doesn't even know that at this point, right? Which is kind of interesting.
Right. Very cool.
But I'm sure that they'll be kind of teaming up again soon. Since they're going to be in the same building, I can't see them not crossing over at some point in Quasar's run. So yeah, it was a pretty fun one. And yeah, again, this kind of reminds me almost of like Galactus showing up and a bunch of Avengers and Earth superheroes kind of teaming up to fight him. So it felt kind of familiar, but a lot of the stuff and a lot of the team ups I haven't seen before. So it kept it interesting and fun. The story itself isn't anything special, I don't think, but yeah, it does a lot of things to kind of make it shine. And I'm going to remember this and what happens here way more, like the details, more than any of the other crossovers we've read, like Secret Wars and stuff like that. The only thing I'm going to remember about those events are like the symbiote showed up there. Do I he got it from some sort of alien vending machine or something? I don't know. It wasn't important. It was stupid. But this is like, I'll remember the things jumping out of the Fantastic car and like grabbing this thing's feet while Wonder Man like punches its ankle so it falls over. Like those kind of moments where they're working together. Firelord and Human Torch teaming up to like absorb the energy coming off of him through the fire and then flying up into space to release it. Like things like that are so interesting and cool. The Invisible Woman's force field and then Thor having to go into like a separate bubble and everything. That's super fun. Like, yeah, I think it did a great job of doing a team up that was an actual story, and it felt more like an actual event because these people are interacting in ways that I would want them to interact with each other and make sense for their characters. So yeah, I surprisingly really enjoyed it. I really thought maybe I enjoyed it so much too because I thought I was going to be absolutely miserable reading these.
Sure.
But
well, I think that like Ralph Macchio, he's not really a terribly popular writer, but he did do some good work. And Rich Buckler's not a great artist, but Tom Palmer I think really helps. And
we've
just
talked
the fact
about
that
him before, I'm positive, Ralph Macchio on Spidercast, I think.
Well, yeah, he probably did a few issues of like Marvel Team Up or something. I'm not sure, but it definitely has that classic Marvel feel. So even if it's not as good as Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, it still has that vibe. Like they're still going for that same vibe. Like you said, like those little details of flying in space and Invisible Woman with her like changing the shape of her invisible whatever it's called force field. Just little things like that. You're right. They're very memorable. And what I would say is that it makes me want to read more issues of Avengers. However, I should alert our listeners to the fact that the next issue is a fill-in by Danny Fingeroth with the same art team, but a fill-in writer. And then 305, John Byrne takes over. And I actually bought 305 off the stands as a kid, but it was unexciting enough that I didn't buy another issue ever again. No. It was okay. Yeah. So let's be clear. It's Mark Gruenwald and Ralph Macchio that are making these issues what they are, right? So, right. But yeah, so definitely good issues, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to read more Avengers after this point because they're not quite as good as this.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So then we're going to read, I can actually summarize the next two.
Yeah, sure.
So the next one, okay. So the next one we're going to talk about is Avengers. Okay, I had to quickly point out, when you saw me counting, it was because I did say this, I think, but those issues came out 7 months before Quasar number 1. This annual came out afterward, I believe, but it explains how he was asked to join the Avengers. So this is a backup story in Avengers Annual 18, The Initiation of Quasar, written by Mark Gruenwald, again, drawn by Mark Bagley, who I've said many times is my least favorite artist, like, ever. I don't like the art at all, but we'll talk about that later. But basically, they've just finished up battling So this is right after Avengers 303,
Yeah.
but before 304. And basically Captain America gets the idea to invite Quasar to join the team officially, and Hawkeye is jealous because he wants Quasar to join his team, which is the West Coast Avengers. And so then there's a little kind of a joke where Hawkeye's like, well, okay, we'll settle this. Where's your home base? He's like, New York. Okay, fine, Cap, you win. So then Hawkeye kind of storms off. So then Quasar kind of goes and thinks about it. He ends up flying to Hydra Base to meet Captain America, and gives him a little flashback to his origin from #1 that we've already seen, how he met Eon, all that stuff. And then basically says that he thinks he might be too busy to join the Avengers. So Cap says, "Why don't you just go think about it? Then we'll see." So then we see kind of like his little initiation, like the application process, like filling out all these like 200 sheets of paper, and then getting his eyes tested or a retina scan for the ID card, and getting checked out by the doctor and blah blah blah. And then basically then he's explaining to Cap what his powers are. He's like, well, I can fly. And then Cap wants to know how fast. So then he times him. He gives him a weird suggestion. He says, why don't you fly as far from here as you can in 5 minutes, grab something, and then come back. So he flies away, comes back, and he hands him a rock. He's like, oh, where'd you get this from? He's like, somewhere in the Sea of Tranquility. And Cap's like, you mean on the moon? So yeah, that's how fast Quasar can fly when he's not in Earth's atmosphere, right? So then he demonstrates how his quantum bands work with kind of like the Green Lantern-esque energy, creating these objects, right? And like he creates scissors, he creates a hammer, blah blah blah. And then to test his strength, Captain America asks him to pick up Hydra Base, which is a gigantic artificial island, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, Quasar manages to. He almost does it.
It's like lifting out of the water. Yeah.
Right. But then just as that happens, Firelord shows up and starts, of course, the classic misunderstanding. He attacks Quasar. Quasar fights back. They're fighting for a couple pages. Then all is explained, and he's like, Quasar's like, we see Captain America's shield thrown in between them, and Quasar explains that Captain America wants them to surrender, so they go down, and Cap explains what's going on, and then basically Captain America's like, well, that's it, you passed, you're an Avenger now, and he hands him the ID card, which of course I have my own Avengers ID card in my drawer that I've had since I was a kid. But anyway, we won't talk about that. Awesome. Yes, I do. Yeah, but anyway, so yeah, I don't know. This was other than the kind of mediocre art, I thought this was a fun little story to explain how he was asked to join the Avengers. What'd you think of it?
Yeah, I love the idea of it. I think that the writing is a little clunky and goofy at times, but I don't know. I also didn't mind. It was such a short little story and it was more of just kind of like a side story, like just like a quick kind of catch up to tell
right
the readers how he joined the team. So it was fine. Right. I think that it's ridiculous that they couldn't just say, hey, how fast are you, Quasar? I don't know exactly how fast, but here, let me see. Zoom, and he flies away like, where'd he go off to? It's like 9 minutes later, boom, comes back. Well, if it took you that long to fly, it took you 10 minutes to fly where you were going. Then he throws him the rock. Where'd you get this? Whoa, you got it. You went to the moon in 9 minutes? It's like, why did he have to be like, fly somewhere, don't tell me where you're actually going, come back with a piece of rock or dirt, and then tell me where you went. And then as he's gone, we have to also have this moment where Cap is like saying out loud, it probably was more smart of me. It would have been more smart of me to have him fly next to the Quinjet, and we can just use a radar to see how fast he's going. It's like, what? Right, I don't know. It's just so clunky. Like, I like the moment. Like, that exchange is so fun with him, like, tossing him the rock and him asking where he got it. That's great. It's just such a strange way to get there. Like, it's like, writing Olympics. It's like, why did we need to do all of these, like, weird setups for this cool joke?
This happens a lot when I'm reading Bronze Age comics, they have great ideas, but they needed a second draft. Like if Quasar would have said, "I can fly really fast," and then Cap said, "How fast?" and then he flew away, came back, and said, "This fast." Well, what's this? It's a piece of rock. So what? From the moon. There's the simplest way to do that gag,
exactly.
right? And that's how I think they should always be striving for. When you have like a medium like this has a limited page count, it has a limited size of a page. You kind of always have to be a minimalist and always be economical. So that's to me how they should have done that gag.
For
Something
sure.
like that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And also, it really bugs me when heroes fight each other over a misunderstanding. It's such a boring cliche at this point.
I agree.
Firelord and Quasar just teamed up together to defeat the Xandarian. Why would he show up and be like, "You're an evil, you're a bad guy," and then start fighting him for no reason? It just was stupid. Like, I don't know. It could have been interesting if maybe it was like set up by Cap or something as like a test to see how strong he was. And then he's like Captain America can even say like, "I have a few surprises of my own," after surprising him with how fast he was and getting the moon rock or something. But it being a misunderstanding is ridiculous. I know. Especially since like the cover of this, let me see. I'm pretty sure that the cover of this story has Firelord in it. Yeah, he's standing next to Firelord. It's like the three characters standing in the front row are Quasar, Captain America, and Firelord. It's like, how is this a weird misunderstanding? I don't know.
No, you know what? You're right. It actually bugs me the more I think about it, because again, we've only got a few pages here, and they could have focused on just interesting ideas. Like, and you're gonna have your fans that will defend this stuff as just recycling these tropes over and over again of the misunderstanding and whatever. But you can keep the same tone, the same spirit of this style of story, but just like make it more interesting. Just make it better. Just focus on things that are more interesting, like the initiation. Like maybe show what he has to do. Like make a gag out of him filling out those pages, right? Like how much time it takes, or make more of a gag out of him getting the retina scan or something. Just dramatize it instead of explaining things, but then like skipping over things that are interesting, but then focusing and wasting time on things that are not interesting. I think that's the problem.
Totally agree.
So
I did enjoy this. I did enjoy this story. I think it helps that it was really short, so they didn't have to drag out a lot of these things that were written poorly. It's just, it's kind of a bummer that it was written in such a way. But I did at least still have fun reading it.
Yeah, me too. Well, and again, Mark Gruenwald, that's how I feel about him overall, is that the tone is always there and the heart is always there, but a lot of times the structure and the execution is really uneven. I'd also want to say that this was published, I was actually wrong, this was published right around the same time as 302. It was published in cover date was October 89. So this came out the same month as Quasar #1. So yeah, that's what cool. It's just kind of interesting, yeah. So with that, we are going to jump to, now this is the hidden gem to me of this whole thing, because this is a solo Quasar story by Mark Gruenwald and Paul Ryan. So this really, again, this was included in the trade paperback, the Quasar Classic trade paperback, which I have, but I never read, because why would I read it when I have the original issues? Well, why did I buy it when I have the original issues? Who knows, right? I just like to buy things that I already own. So basically, this story opens up with Quasar flying over New York City, and a lovely splash page by Paul Ryan and Danny Bulanadi, I think that's how you pronounce his name. And he's flying along, and he happens upon this scantily clad woman named Jennifer Kale, and I think she has another name, but I'm not sure.
He is tracking, to be clear, he's tracking this with the bands, right? So he gets a notification on his bands that there's some sort of weird alien activity happening. So he goes to investigate what's going on. Yeah.
Right. And she's in this swamp, and he pulls her out, and then she basically explains that she needs him to help her friend, which is the Man Thing. And for those that don't know, the Man Thing is Marvel's version of Swamp Thing, but he can't speak. Right? He's like kind of like a savage version of the Swamp Thing. So Quasar walks over and he's trying to talk to him, and then Man Thing just knocks him over, and he's like, "What the heck is going on?" So then the girl explains that Man Thing encountered this. He explains that Man Thing is the guardian of the interdimensional nexus located in this swamp. So they show Man Thing fighting this semi-solid mud-like body thing that's like floating in the air, and he's like trying to punch it and hit it and attack it. But then what happens is after he interacts with this thing, he basically his stomach starts to grow and swell up, and she's like, it's almost as if he were, and then Quasar says, pregnant, and she's like, exactly. So they're not quite sure what's going on, but they basically, this is like weird, but basically he's laying there, and they figure out that they have to give him a cesarean section. And then on the next page, since you're not allowed to show pregnancy in
right.
code-approved comic books, we see this guy laying on the ground who's kind of dressed like Destro from G.I. Joe, except he has like a blonde mohawk. And he wakes up, and then he punches Quasar, whack. And then he kind of like wrestles the girl down to the ground. Then Quasar recovers and comes back with his quantum bands glowing. He blasts this guy, who we find out later is Quagmire. And then they're fighting back and forth. And it's a very well-drawn scene. But we find out that he's actually from Earth S. They don't say Earth S, but he's from another Earth that we know is Earth S, which is the home of the Squadron Supreme. Which I don't think you've read any Squadron Supreme stories yet, have you?
No.
Okay, so
no.
But one day you will. Don't worry. One day. And so that's pretty much it. So she explains that he's from another Earth, and she can tell by his reading his memories. She can tell that he's from an Earth like he thinks he's from Earth, but it's actually a different Earth because she can recognize that the images don't match.
Mm-hmm.
So then she's like, well, he was apparently sucked through a nexus in that dimension and came out here. And she's like, well, and he's like, well, anyway, can I call you sometime? And she's like, anytime, I'm listed. And then he just flies away, and he's got Quagmire in this little cocoon, and that's it. That's the end of the story.
Mm-hmm.
The end. I thought it was, it was almost like, well, of course, it's just like an issue of Quasar. It was great. It was a fun little story. Mm-hmm. Very well done art by Paul Ryan and Danny Bulanadi. I don't know what to say about it. Again, it's a lost hidden gem for me, and I'm glad I read it. I thought it was fun. What'd you think?
Yeah, it's very weird, very strange. Probably the most science fiction-y story we've gotten yet with Quasar, which is saying a lot.
Yeah.
I was super into it, honestly, until Quagmire showed up. Like, it's just strange, I guess, that it was like a fully grown man with clothes and everything on. I'm not sure why that he had to be born into this universe. They don't explain it.
Sure,
I'm not sure they ever will. And I don't know, not that I hated it before, but like, I wish I just would have gotten maybe a little bit more of an answer as to what is going on. Even like a hint as to where this might be going, because it's also not even that like he was just born, right? He has his memories of who he was before he got to this place. So it's like we're left with so many unanswered questions. I don't know. Is this a character that's been in comics before?
Quagmire, yes. He's been in Squadron Supreme, like the miniseries, plus a few other appearances, probably, yeah.
Okay, so maybe that explains how he did this and what's going on, but as somebody who...
Not really.
No, okay, cool.
Like, I don't think his particular character or power set explains why this happened to him. I think it could have been anyone, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Okay. But it's pretty cool. It's interesting. I really like that... I don't know. I kind of wish Quagmire wasn't a part of this and it was just some sort of alien creature or something, because then it could it would feel more like Quasar is showing up to just help Man-Thing instead of there being like this mustache twirling villain that's behind it all. Like it could just be an alien threat that shows up and it's more of him like protecting rather than going and punching a dude again.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I kind of liked it still. It's a weird one. Again, I think it helps that it's a shorter story, so that way the weirdness kind of goes by quickly. But yeah, it was fun.
Well, I also should point out this also came out the same month as Quasar #1. So it's almost like a little preview, right? So this Marvel Comics Presents series, which was bi-weekly, and every issue of Marvel Comics Presents had, it started in X-Man in a solo story, then it had other stories with other characters. At first it was Wolverine, then it was Havoc, then Colossus, then whoever. Then it was just Wolverine forever, right? Because he's so popular. But it's a great way to expose readers to other characters, right? Because in this issue, you have Havoc, you have Black Panther, Quasar, and then a character called Cold Blood, who obviously went on to much bigger things because we've never heard of him. But overall, a cool idea for a series. And yeah, this story was not a masterpiece, but I really liked it. And I especially got to say the art was great. Like, it was just great. The way that the woman was drawn was excellent. The way Man-Thing was drawn. You know, it's funny because...
The fight between them is great, too.
Right. It's so clearly done. Like, the line work is just... Yeah, you're right. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
It's very... It's not... It's the opposite of sloppy. It's just very well choreographed and graceful, I guess you could say. It's just really clean art. I really like it.
Everything's very deliberate. Like it's super clear as to what's happening. And that's very rare, I find, in fight sequences. It's usually kind of just like fist in face, or like energy blasts or whatever. We don't really like understand what's happening or where everything is. The clear use of Quagmire.
Quagmire
is a Pokemon, sorry. Quagmire. Using his like black sludge mud powers juxtaposed with Quasar's bright yellow energy beams fighting, and like the clear lines as they're kind of like interacting with each other really helps. I particularly love this really long panel of Quasar using the hammers to like hit him on either side, and he's holding out his arms in like a T pose with the sludge stopping it. Like, it's just so clear, and it helps for you to understand what's going on and makes it that much more enjoyable. So
that was one of my favorite panels too.
Yeah,
it stood out.
Yeah, the art's great in this one.
And I also got to say that I always wondered why Paul Ryan's art was not as good in Fantastic Four, and I blamed the inker, but it was the same inker. It was Danny Bulanadi on Fantastic Four, and that happened once before. John Bogdanov, when he was doing Man of Steel, the first year and a half before Superman died, the inks were by Dennis Janke, and they were so graceful. They were like Murphy Anderson, kind of like this. And then after the death of Superman, it's like he completely changed his inking style to like a jaggedy type art.
Interesting.
Almost closer to something Image would do, but not quite Image. And I just wonder if it was like an editorial mandate. I hope not, but...
I wonder too if it's time too, because this is a much shorter story. So
could be.
You would have way more time to focus on it. So
yeah, you're right.
But yeah, I really do love the art in this one. Maybe the best of the few issues we've read this week for sure.
Yeah, you're right. Which is, I think, like you said, which we can owe to it only being a short story, so they had more time to work on it. Yeah, it is really good.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would say that I would read more, but I know I'm going to read more because I've already read them 20 times each, and we're going to keep on rereading them, and we're going to keep on reviewing them. So on the next issue of QUA-NOLOGY, we're going to be jumping back to the monthly title, covering issues 7, 8, 9. So be sure to join us for that. And on our other podcasts, next week we're going to be doing on Tape Crusaders, we're reviewing The Amazing Spider-Man, and on Slam, we're going to review The Flash. So be sure to join us for that. And Josh, you can take it from here.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. You can find all of our stuff from all of our different podcasts and videos on our website at thecomicbooksyndicate.com. You can also find us on Facebook and YouTube at the same name. Please leave us a review or comment on our posts. Let us know what you guys think about the comics and the movies and videos and stuff that we're talking about. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you guys think. So let's keep that comics conversation going.
All right. So until next week, see you later.